Halls of Infusion returns as one of the dungeons for Mythic Plus in Season 4. This dungeon will start with a 35-minute timer, so as long as you complete the dungeon within that window, you will upgrade your key. As you start up in the Halls of Infusion, you'll encounter many different mobs. Primalist Geomancers will cast an AoE ability named Seismic Slam, so make sure to sidestep out of the 5-yard radius here. Refty Defenders will be the first tank buster mobs you'll find in this dungeon. They have a Spear Flurry frontal ability that bleeds any targets hit with Gushing Wound, so face these mobs away. Your group must save an interrupt for their demoralizing shoutcast. This will prevent him from decreasing your party's damage by 25% for 8 seconds. Containment Apparatus will channel a containment beam that you'll want to stop. It deals high single target damage until the channel finishes. This mob also has an AoE ability named Expulse, dealing big holy damage to anybody within 20 yards. You must interrupt this or you'll wipe. Primalist Ravagers will buff their allies' attack and movement speed through their Tailwind aura, so be careful what you pull these mobs with. After clearing half of the ring, you'll run down the stairs to the first boss, Watcher Irideus. This boss is a 2-phase encounter and the boss starts at 30% health. During the first phase, Irideus will apply Power Overload to 2 random players. Healers can dispel this debuff or let it expire, but be aware that as soon as it is removed, it will drop a power field on the floor that you'll want to avoid, so place these puddles out of harm's way. Following this, he will fire Spark Volleys at the ground which your group will need to dodge, otherwise it will leave a 10-second magic dot on you. Tanks will want to face the boss away from the group to avoid hitting them with the boss's frontal, Titanic Fist, which will knock anyone down that gets hit. During this phase, healers should be prepared to use their cooldowns when the Watcher is casting Static Surge. This deals heavy group-wide damage. When the boss enters phase 2, he'll begin to channel Siphon Power. At this point, nullification devices will start spawning that your tank will need to aggro and tank on top of the boss. Once these devices are killed, they let off a nullifying pulse that inflicts arcane damage and silences anybody within 12 yards, but this pulse will also remove a stack of the boss's ablative shield. You'll need to kill 3 of these devices on top of the boss to fully break the shield, and you need to do this as quick as possible so that Irideus doesn't gain too many Siphon Power stacks. Every stack that he gets during this phase will increase his nature damage done by 2% for 40 seconds, so the aim of the game here is to break the shield ASAP. Do note that every time a shield is broken, there will be swirlies that you need to dodge. Now that we've defeated the Watcher, we can progress to the next boss. This is what you need to know about the upcoming trash. Primalist Shock Troopers must be kicked when they cast Elemental Focus, otherwise they buff their lightning bolts into chain lightnings on the highest threat target. This will deal massive damage to your group. Skulking Zealots will be stealthed and cheap shot the first target they are in combat with. You can combat this by damaging them first while they're in stealth so that you don't get stunned. If not, healers be prepared to save your tank. These mobs are high priority kill targets, as with every melee attack they increase their attack speed by 4%, so tanks be prepared. You'll also encounter some curious Swoglets. The only thing you need to watch out for here is the toxin they apply, because this will instantly kill you at 10 stacks. Just be sure to CC and kite these mobs. Dazzling Dragonflies will cast Dazzle, a frontal disorient that you should sidestep as you don't really need to waste the kick here. Flamecaller Amy can be found just before the door to the second boss. You want to interrupt her Pyretic Burst, avoid being hit by the Magma Crush Swirly, and kick her Cauterize ability so that she doesn't heal. Squallbringer Sirats can also be found here. Just make sure that your tank gathers threat on the Zeppelins that spawn during the fight. Now we move on to the Gulping Goliath. During the fight, he will cast Overpowering Croak, dealing party-wide damage, so use a defensive here. But it also causes rocks to fall that you need to dodge. On these rocks follow 2 curious Swoglets that we met earlier. You'll want to use CC to keep the Swoglets underneath the Goliath so that when he casts Gulp, he consumes them all to prevent him from getting hangry, increasing his physical damage done by 50% for 1 minute. The boss will also leap to a targeted location with Belly Slam that you need to avoid, and finally, healers should be prepared for big healing when the boss casts Toxic Effluvia. Once you've defeated the Goliath, you'll continue down towards the next boss, Khajin. This whole area is packed with Proto-Drakes and different caster mobs. Glacial Proto-Dragons will cast Oceanic Breath, a frontal you'll need to sidestep, but they also gain access to Deep Chill, inflicting massive AoE frost damage to your party and applying a frost dot for 12 seconds that also reduces movement speed by 30%. You can use Freedom-like abilities to remove this dot. Primalist Earthshakers will cast Rumbling Earth, dealing huge nature damage and stunning anyone within 8 yards, so step out from this ability. Primalist Gale Singers will cast Thunderstrike on a random player, dealing big nature damage to all players within 7 yards of its impact. Use a defensive if you're targeted here, or you can stop this cast with hard CC. Primalist Ice Callers will cast Ice Shard on the tank, but more importantly, you'll need to kick their Refreshing Tides cast before they heal their allies. Khajin the Unyielding. During the encounter, the boss will pulse out constant ticking damage through polar winds that your healer will need to keep on top of. Healers will also need to spot heal the tank and dispel the player struck with Frost Shot. This will deal a big chunk of the tank's health and slow them by 50% for 6 seconds. Whenever Khajin begins to cast Hailstorm, Make sure to hide behind ice boulders that are dotted around the encounter. Don't be tricked into hiding behind the broken ones though, as they'll trigger an avalanche when they are broken by the hailstorm, inflicting massive frost damage to all players within 12 yards of the impact. Make sure to dodge the glacial surge at all costs. This ring will start close to her and expand outwards, so stay out for the first tick and then run in close. You'll also need to avoid the frost cyclone she aims at a random player. This deals fatal damage and knocks players back, but it's also important not to aim this towards any ice boulders as it will break them in the process, making them unsafe for the next hailstorm. After defeating Khajin, you'll now head towards the Infusion chamber where you'll find the Primal Tsunami. As you approach the final bridge, constant waves will approach you from the left and right side of the platform. If you fail to dodge these waves, they'll deal damage to you and probably knock you off, so keep these waves in the back of your mind the whole time. Aqua Rages will buff their damage by 50% for 15 seconds through Boiling Rage, so make sure you kick this or soothe it if it does go off. As they reach 20% health, they'll cast Tidal Divergence, splitting themselves into 4 Aqualings, so make sure to kick this ability. As you near the end of the gauntlet, you'll encounter one last mini-boss named Infuser Saria. Use a defensive for her Inundate cast. This deals massive unavoidable AoE damage to players within 40 yards. You'll also need to interrupt her Aqueous Barrier to prevent her from gaining a massive shield. And finally, stay out of her Flash Flood AoE cast, as this will damage you and knock you back. After defeating the Infuser, the tsunamis will stop. Except the final boss, the Primal Tsunami. This boss is a 2-phase encounter. During stage 1, you will fight on the main platform until the boss reaches 50%. You'll need to avoid being hit by the infused globules. Failing to do so will inflict high frost damage and apply Waterlogged, a 5-second debuff that slows you and inflicts upfront damage. Note that this can be dispelled. At 60% health, the boss will cast away, trapping you in a bubble of water and sending you back to the start of the bridge. Here your goal is to make it back as quickly as possible while dodging the crashing tsunami waves we saw earlier. After making it back to the boss, there will be 4 Primalist Infusers channeling Infuse to the boss, increasing its damage done by 1%, and this effect stacks every 5 seconds, so make sure you get back and interrupt quickly. Do note that you might not want to interrupt them all at once. These Infusers again cast Inundate, a massive party-wide nuke that must be stopped with hard CC, so I'd recommend breaking 2 out and leaving the other 2 hard CC'd. After taking out these Infusers, the Primal Tsunami will spawn again. The tanks will want to use Active Mitigation for the Squall buff at cast, knocking them back and applying a Focused Deluge buff, dealing ticking frost damage for 5 seconds. Get back into melee ASAP so the boss doesn't cast Undertow, which will deal massive damage to the entire party. Speaking of AoE damage, healers will need to be ready for the boss's Tempest Fury ability, radiating frost damage to all players, so prepare a cooldown for here, and the rest of your group should use defensives. But that's all you need to know for this encounter, and that wraps up Halls of Infusion in Mythic Plus. If this guide did help you or a friend out, then please feel free to drop a like down below and subscribe to your boy. And until next time, I'll catch you guys later.